When the white envelope appeared on my porch that cold January morning, I thought it was another local advertisement or maybe a flyabout neighborhood watch. It wasn't. It was a lawsuit. The bold black letters glared at me like a threat. Summons. Failure to pay Homeowners Association dues. I laughed at first. Honestly, I did. How could I owe dues to a homeowners association when I wasn't even part of one? My property wasn't governed by any HOA, and I made sure that when I bought the house 3 years ago. The deed was clean, the covenants were old and expired, and the realtor had even joked, "No HOA drama here, just peace and quiet." That peace ended the moment I tore open that envelope. Inside, the papers listed my full name, address, and a supposed balance due of $3,472.89, along with interest, fees, and something called maintenance surcharges. The plaintiff, Riverview Homeowners Association Incorporated. I'd never heard of them, but apparently they'd heard of me. For a few hours, I tried to convince myself this was just a clerical mistake, a wrong address, maybe some overzealous board president who mixed up properties. But the next day, a thick packet appeared, certified mail. This time, inside was a court summons. They were serious. The HOA was actually suing me. And when I called the number listed for HOA Legal Affairs, a sharp voice answered, "Riverview Homeowners Association. This is Angela. How can I help?" "Yes," I said carefully. "This is Michael Tanner. I think there's been a mistake. I received notice that you're suing me for unpaid dues. But I'm not in your HOA." A pause, then a scoff. "Sir, every homeowner in this area is part of Riverview HOA." "That's impossible. My property isn't within your boundaries. I checked before I bought it." "You're mistaken," she said flatly. "Our records show your parcel as part of Section 4 of the Riverview expansion. You owe 3 years of unpaid dues, plus late fees. If you have concerns, you can bring them up in court." And just like that, she hung up. That night, I pulled every document I had out of my filing cabinet. Deed, title insurance, survey map. I compared them to the plat maps online. My property was not within their boundaries. The Riverview HOA stopped one street over. Mine was part of a separate subdivision developed 20 years earlier. Still, I went down to the county office the next day, just to be sure. The clerk, an older man with wire-rimmed glasses, studied my deed and shook his head. "You're not under any HOA, Mr. Tanner. Never have been. Then how can they sue me?" He gave a grim little smile. "Because they think they can." By the time my first court date arrived, I had spent nights scouring forums, reading horror stories about rogue HOA trying to expand their territory illegally. Some people had lost their homes because they couldn't afford the bogus fees or the cost of fighting back. But I wasn't about to roll over. When I walked into that small county courtroom, the air smelled of paper and dust. The HOA's attorney, a slick man in a Navy suit, was already there, chatting with a woman I recognized from one of the mailings. Angela, the same one who hung up on me. She was the HOA president, apparently. When the judge called my name, I stood tall. "Your Honor," the attorney began, "the defendant, Mr. Tanner, resides within the Riverview community boundaries and is therefore subject to its bylaws and dues." "That's false," I said immediately. "My property is not part of the association. The deed makes that clear." He smirked. "We have updated maps that show otherwise." The judge looked between us. "Show me the documentation." The attorney slid over a few printed maps. I could tell instantly they were altered, fuzzy borders, no official stamps. Just photocopies. "Your Honor," I said, handing over my original counter-stamp survey. "These are fabricated. My property line ends 50 feet outside their jurisdiction. Here's the county record confirming that." The judge frowned and leaned closer. "Mr. Tanner is correct. Counselor, your map doesn't match the county's data. Where did this come from?" The attorney's confidence faltered. From the HOA planning files." "Those are not official," the judge said sharply. "You cannot unilaterally expand HOA boundaries without county approval." The courtroom went quiet. Angela's face turned red. The judge sighed. "Mr. Tanner, I'm going to dismiss this case for now. But I want you to file a formal motion with supporting evidence, and I'll review it fully next session. HOA expansions are a serious matter. Dismissed? For now. But I knew it wasn't over. 2 days later, I came home to find something worse than a lawsuit. A lien notice taped to my front door. The HOA had recorded a lien on my property, illegally, claiming unpaid assessments. That's when I stopped playing defense. I went back to the county clerk and obtained copies of Riverview HOA's incorporation documents, bylaws, and expansion filings. What I found was gold. They'd never filed the required paperwork for the expansion they claimed included my property. The documents had been drafted, but not signed by the county registrar. Worse, the HOA had been operating with expired registration for nearly a year. Legally, they didn't even exist as a functioning corporation. They were bluffing everyone. Armed with that, I filed a counterclaim for fraudulent lien, harassment, and abuse of legal process. When the next hearing came, the judge was ready for war, and so was I. "Mr. Tanner," he said, scanning my paperwork, "I see you brought substantial evidence. Please proceed." I laid everything out: the unregistered corporation, the falsified maps, the expired filings, and the fraudulent lien. Each page struck like a hammer. The attorney tried to object, but the judge cut him off. "Counselor, this is damning. Are you aware your client's corporation has been inactive for 11 months? Angela shifted nervously in her seat. "That's a clerical issue, Your Honor. We're in the process of renewing." The judge held up a hand. Clerical or not, an inactive corporation cannot file lawsuits, collect dues, or record liens. This case is bordering on malicious litigation. He looked at me. "Mr. Tanner, you will have your day for damages soon enough. For now, I'm ordering a full review of Riverview HOA's legal standing." I felt a pulse of satisfaction, but it wasn't victory yet, because while the courtroom battle was on pause, the Real War moved to the neighborhood. Overnight, my mailbox filled with nasty anonymous letters. "Pay your dues, freeloader. Stop ruining our community. You'll regret this." Someone even dumped garbage on my lawn. Cameras caught nothing but a hooded figure in the dark. It was clear the HOA wasn't going to back down quietly. But I wasn't alone. One afternoon, a neighbor named Linda knocked on my door. "I heard what's happening," she whispered. "You're not the only one. They've been bullying people for years." She showed me copies of letters demanding back dues from other residents who technically lived outside the HOA's boundaries. Most people had paid just to avoid trouble. That's when I knew this wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a racket, a fraudulent HOA empire built on intimidation. I began digging deeper. Corporate filings, financial reports, and even bank statements from public records. The numbers didn't add up. Thousands in maintenance fees unaccounted for. Payments routed to a private P.O. box instead of the HOA's registered address. And then I found a smoking gun, an internal email leak from a disgruntled former board member. In it, Angela had written, "We'll include the Tanner property in the expansion and collect dues." He's too naive to fight it. Naive, huh? That email would change everything. But revenge, true revenge, wasn't about anger. It was about justice served cold, legally and perfectly timed. So I waited. I gathered witnesses. I compiled a report so airtight even the judge couldn't ignore it. Because the next hearing wasn't going to be just about dismissing their fake lawsuit. It was going to be about ending the HOA altogether. And as I lay awake the night before the final trial, staring at the ceiling, one thought echoed in my mind, a question that burned like fire. When power is built on lies, how far will people go to protect it? I didn't know the answer then, but I was about to find out. The morning of the final hearing broke gray and cold, the kind of chill that clings to your bones and whispers that something big is about to happen. I stood outside the courthouse, coffee in one hand and a folder of evidence in the other. Inside that folder was the end of Riverview HOA and the end of Angela's reign. People say revenge is a dish best served cold. Mine was ice. I wasn't nervous. Not anymore. I'd done my homework, built my case, and prepared every word. Today wasn't about defending myself. It was about exposing them. When I walked into the courtroom, Angela and her attorney were already there. She wore a stiff smile, the kind that tried too hard to hide fear. Her pearls gleamed, but her hands fidgeted in her lap. The judge entered, and the room fell silent. Case of Riverview Homeowners Association versus Michael Tanner. Continuation of proceedings, the clerk announced. The judge looked directly at me. Mr. Tanner, I understand you brought additional evidence for the court's consideration. Yes, Your Honor, I said, standing, and I believe what I have will make the situation very clear. I began with the basics, the official county plat maps, the inactive corporate status, the false land. The judge nodded, already familiar with much of it from the previous hearing. But then I brought out the heavy artillery. Your Honor, I'd like to submit Exhibit D, a series of emails recovered from a former board member of Riverview HOA. The opposing attorney immediately objected. Your Honor, these emails are private communications and they were voluntarily provided by a former board member. I interrupted, and they directly relate to the association's attempt to defraud property owners outside a jurisdiction. The judge took the documents and began to read. For a long minute, the only sound in the courtroom was the shuffle of papers. When he looked up, his expression was stone. Mrs. Daniels, he said, turning to Angela, did you write these emails? Angela's voice trembled. I may have written something similar, but... He raised his hand. Answer the question. Yes, she whispered. The judge's jaw tightened. This email explicitly instructs your board to add properties outside the HOA's legal boundaries for the purpose of collecting dues. Do you deny that? Angela glanced at her lawyer, who looked ready to melt into the floor. It was a misunderstanding, she stammered. We believed those homes were part of an expansion plan. An expansion plan that was never filed with the county, I said sharply. You didn't believe anything. You saw an opportunity to squeeze more money out of people who couldn't fight back. The judge didn't stop me. He just leaned back and let the silence grow. Then came the financials. I projected the bank statements on the courtroom screen, line by line, showing thousands of dollars in maintenance fees diverted to an unregistered P.O. box and cash through a private account belonging to, you guess it, Angela Daniels. Her attorney paled. The judge's voice boomed through the room. Mrs. Daniels, do you have an explanation for why association funds were deposited into your personal account? Angela's face drained of color. Those were reimbursements. Reimbursements, I said, for landscaping contract that never existed, vendors that were never hired, and repairs that were never done. You embezzled money from your own neighbors. Gasps rippled through the small audience seated in the back. A few of them, resident from Riverview, exchanged horrified looks. The judge exhaled slowly. Mr. Tanner, please continue. I handed him one last document, the fraudulent lien filed against my property. This, I said, is the final proof. The HOA filed this lien while it was an inactive corporation, claiming authority it didn't have. They used it to threaten me, to scare me into paying money I never owed. They've done it to others, too. I have signed statements from 5 additional homeowners. The judge set the paper down and rubbed his temple. I've seen enough. He turned to the HOA's attorney. Counselor, your client's actions are not only negligent but potentially criminal. They have operated without authority, fabricated boundary maps, and attempted to extort funds through fraudulent means. The attorney swallowed hard. Your Honor, if I may. No, the judge snapped. You may not. The court hereby rules in favor of the defendant, Mr. Tanner, on all counts. The lien against his property is declared void and will be expunged immediately. Angela's eyes widened. I could see her world collapsing behind them, but the judge wasn't done. Furthermore, he continued, this court orders the immediate dissolution of Riverview Homeowners Association Incorporated. Their corporate charter is hereby terminated, and all assets are to be frozen pending an audit and investigation by the district attorney's office. The words hit the room like thunder. Angela's mouth fell open. Why you can't do that? I just did, the judge said, and given the evidence, the DA will likely pursue charges for fraud and embezzlement. The gavel came down, one sharp, echoing crack. It was over. I didn't move at first. I just stood there, staring at the wooden bench, letting the weight of it sink in. After months of harassment, sleepless nights, and anger boiling beneath the surface. The nightmare was finally ending. But the story didn't stop there. Outside the courthouse, reporters had gathered. Apparently word had spread about the rogue HOA case. Cameras flashed as I stepped out, and microphones pointed my way. "Mr. Tanner, how do you feel about the judge's decision?" I smiled for the first time in months. "Justice," I said simply, "feels better than revenge." But inside, I knew that wasn't entirely true. Revenge had been part of it. Sweet, silent revenge against those who thought they could bully their neighbors and get away with it. And I wasn't finished yet. In the weeks that followed, the dominoes fell fast. The local news ran a 3-part series on the Riverview scandal. Homeowners from all over the county came forward with similar stories: inflated dues, phantom fees, threats of foreclosure. The district attorney launched an official investigation into several HOAs, not just Riverview. Angela was charged with fraud, embezzlement, and falsifying public documents. Her attorney cut ties with her. She tried to plead ignorance, but the paper trail was undeniable. Meanwhile, I was contacted by residents who'd been too afraid to speak up. They wanted advice, guidance, anything. So I created a website, HOAtruth.com, a place where people could share their experiences and find legal resources. It grew fast, faster than I expected. Within a month, local news outlets were linking to it, and attorneys reached out offering free consultation for victims. What started as my personal fight turned into something bigger, a movement against HOA abuse. One day, a letter arrived in the mail. For a moment, I tensed. The instinctive fear from those first days still lingered. But when I opened it, I saw it was from the county court. Inside was a check. Restitution, $18,950. The amount covered every penny of legal fees, lost wages, and emotional damages a court had deemed appropriate. But that wasn't the satisfying part. The satisfying part was a note attached. Funds recovered from the dissolution of Riverview HOA. They had to pay me with their own stolen money. Months later, I drove past what used to be the Riverview HOA office, a small rented unit near the edge of town. The windows were boarded up. The sign was gone. Weeds pushed through cracks in the sidewalk. It was silent now. I parked for a moment and just sat there, watching the wind whip through the empty lot. It was poetic, how arrogance and greed had destroyed them faster than I ever could. Linda, my neighbor, called me that evening. "You did it," she said, her voice soft with pride. "You really did it." "We did it," I corrected. "They messed with the wrong neighborhood." Time passed. Life went back to normal. The quiet peace I'd once taken for granted returned. Only now it felt earned. But every now and then, I get a message from someone new. A homeowner in another state, another city, fighting their own HOA nightmare. They'd write, "I read your story. It gave me the courage to fight back." That made it all worth it. Still, sometimes I think about Angela. About how sure she looked that first day, confident that her position gave her power. I wonder if she ever thinks about the people she hurt, or if she's still blaming everyone but herself. But I don't waste much time on that, because in the end, justice doesn't need your attention. It just needs your persistence. And I had plenty of that. The last time I saw Angela was in the local paper, a mugshot, tired eyes, the headline beneath it reading, "Former HOA president sentenced to 2 years probation for fraudulent practices." I cut out the article and tucked it into the same folder that once held my lawsuit papers. A reminder, not of anger, but of victory. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't shouting or fighting. It's letting the truth do the shouting for you. And as I sat on my porch one evening, the sun dipping behind the rooftops, I thought back to the beginning, that first envelope, the cold morning, the confusion and disbelief. I smiled. They had started this war. But I had finished it, and for the first time in a long while, I felt peace, real peace, the kind you can only feel after standing up for yourself and winning.